Good.
Good. Any other questions on the problem paper?
Were there other questions that we didn't hear?
Harrison had a question. He said, is it possible for a plan to be too detailed? I think absolutely. I mean, generally you're striving for more detail with these plans than less detail, but you could make an argument that it's overkill and over repetitious and unreadable, and I tend to want more detail because of my profession, but I could see that being a legitimate criticism of the plan.
I mean, that's just kind of
probably not with the fact base, but other stuff. Mm-hmm. You can't have too much data if it's correctly displayed and articulated, which is a different story.
I just felt like that first half of the Sarasota plan, or first like 100 pages or so, could have been
absolutely
condensed or reorganized to flow better.
Right.
There's a lot of repetitive stuff in it.
Yes, and I think that's a legitimate criticism. Okay, so today we are going to talk about kind of a side issue here. Not a side issue, but we're taking a little turn off on our highway towards the end of this class, a little rest stop. And we're going to focus on this idea of wetland alteration. So by now, particularly in coastal areas, we know that wetlands tend to be these regionally significant critical habitats. They've got all these values, ecosystem service values, from breeding grounds, feeding grounds, stopover areas. There's a lot of evidence that it's pretty much a done deal, that they help reduce negative impacts on water quality. There's been I won't say lots, but there's been an ongoing stream of research that Wes Heifeld and I have started on a little bit 10 years ago on the value of wetlands and reducing flood impacts and flooding based on flow at the watershed scale. So we probably make sense to take a pause and think closely about the role of wetlands, which is usually considered at a site level, right? So you've got amazing scholars like Anna Armitage, marine biologist down here, probably the best wetland ecologist in the entire university. She goes out and she looks at an acre, maybe even less, maybe it's like a quarter of an acre, tramps through the marsh. It's all scientific too. And then there's been other studies looking at, say, at flow and flooding and water quality. I had a student, Tracy Gwaltney, I think she got married. She was a master's student in the Ecosystem Science and Management program, and I was somehow her chair years ago. And she was working in this facility related to A&M up at College Station, and they turned on the sprinklers and stuff started to run off. They created runoff and then would test it in this little plot of how different types of grasses affected the runoff by turning on sprinklers. It's a common, I think it was the experiment station. And that was interesting. They've done it using looking at wetlands from a simulated perspective, computer models. That's all great, but for our purposes, we're not as interested in a single patch of wetland as much as the network of patches over the landscape, over, say, a watershed, right? And that's really hard for physical or ecological scientists to do, because they go out and they sample and spend time, and you really can't do that if you have 1 million acres you need to cover. So that then provides an opportunity for managers, planners, geospatial experts to really come in and scale up and provide us with information that is more useful to policymaking. There's 2 ways to do it. We can take a picture of space. So all the land cover data sets we've been looking at, pictures I've showed you, the viewers, those are based on satellite images, remote sensing data, and there are courses in that. We use a lot of remote sensing data, but I tend not to get into the classification from infrared sensors in space. But we can actually get down to 2 square meters. We tend to use 30 square meters grid, and we can identify, is it wetlands, is it freshwater wetlands, saltwater wetlands. You can really get somewhat detailed, not say very detailed, based on the signature, the reflective signature of the land cover. And there's a whole branch of science dedicated to interpreting and using pictures from space. But as planners and developers and managers, I don't think that's good enough either. Now we're looking at landscapes, but addresses matter, because that's where the houses are, where the pavement is, that replaces these wetlands. That's what drives the pattern of development and human fragmentation that we've been so consumed about in this course. So about in 2004, 11 years ago, I wrote this grant and literally made up that we would somehow get the record of wetland alteration at a address level, at a point scale, and we were going to map analyze that record over a 13-year period, and it was going to be awesome. We're going to do all kinds of stuff with it. And I had no idea if this was even possible. Well, we got the grant, and it was a $500,000 sole PI grant. And then came time to actually make good on doing this. But if we could do it, what a more precise record than a picture from space. If we have a point alteration. At the time, I was in College Station, and people down here, like the Galveston Bay Estuary, the Galveston Bay Foundation, they had people sitting at the core with in front of filing cabinets where they pull an individual record and make some kind of notation. And they could get about, 10 records done a day. I wanted tens of thousands to be able to map and spatial analyze it. And consider 2004, if you had a gigabyte of RAM, you were doing awesome. Like, that was high end. So you were limited, and GIS was still not what it is today, but it was there. So just to make this into a more interesting story, we decided, yes, the data existed, which was an amazing revelation because it took a huge flyer. Insane academic risk, intellectual risk, and it resided at the Army Corps of Engineers, which was also kind of surprising because you would think an agency that's responsible for tracking wetland alteration would not be an Army Corps of Engineers. It'd be somewhere like EPA or Department of Interior, blah, blah. But it turns out under the Clean Water Act of the United States, if you fill in a wetland, you need a permit. And there are a couple different kinds of permits. If you have a driver's license, a heartbeat, and sometimes like $20, you can get a permit to pave over a wetland. And this record, at the time, it was not a spatial record, but it was digital, and we had addresses, had piled up for decades, sitting in the coffers of the Army Corps of Engineer district offices. So I dressed up a couple grad students, literally. We basically faked an official letter from A&M, and we drove down to the Corps office in Galveston, and they had a meeting, and walked out of there with a CD. They freaked out. And this woman's like, just take it. She burned a CD of every Section 404 wetland alteration permit for Texas from 91 to 2003. But it was dirty. It was a mess. But that same student who mapped roadkill was able to take this data set and map it, and from there we were able to analyze it, the spatial record of wetland alteration, temporally. We looked at the relationship between that and flooding and water quality. So that same student was the guy who just walked out, by the way, is Wes Highfield. That was the guy, right? I was hoping he would be here to be embarrassed, but he left. He was that good. He's that good. So that started this odyssey of, and no one else had the data. We got it in Texas. We just walked in there and walked out. Florida, they didn't want to give it to us. So I gave up, but the students decided, let's file a FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. I'm like, I didn't have tenure. I was just brand new. I was kind of this kind of thing. But it worked. And at the last day they were supposed to give it to us, it came, again, dirty. We found heinous violations of the Clean Water Act, which is why they didn't want us to have it. Texas really didn't care. Florida really, Jacksonville district did not want us to see this data. Now the data is all geospatial. It's much easier to get. You know, it's a different culture. Back then we had something and we published a lot off of it. So this is where I usually show you what it looks like, and I show you some of the research we did on it. But rather than do that, and the PowerPoint presentation is up on the website, I'm going to hand it over to the next generation of researchers using this data, which is Reja. Is his master's project is using this data that's been updated. So now we have 91 to 2014, and he's looking at it in a unique way. And I noticed his PowerPoint presentation pretty much covers everything I was going to cover anyway. So I'm going to turn over the class to him. You okay with this?
Yeah.
You good with this? He's good with this. It's like, no problem. I do this in my sleep. And he's I want you to just tell the story of what you're doing, and along the way, explain some of the basic stuff of, what this data is from, what it's about, the best you can. Now, realize that 99% of all permits that are applied for are granted. And in the history of this program, EPA has veto authority. They've done it like 11 times. That's what I hear. So it's a real issue. The scale and pace of wetland alteration, and the laws have changed. So now, if it's not in navigable waters, you don't even need to get a permit for it. So this is underestimating the scale and scope of the alteration that we're experiencing. And also keep in mind, this is really site-specific, so it really helps us in our understanding of fragmentation of ecological systems. So Reja, the floor is yours. What I want you to do is present, and then we'll jump on the atlas where the updated data has been placed, thanks to the GIS class here in Galveston last semester. And we could also do our own analysis and look at, which I've never done, look at these points, these 13,000 points or something like that, along with all the other data on the atlas. None of you found in your own little planning exercise. It's buried in there. So that's the second thing I want to do if we have time. If not, we can do it next class.
Okay.
Take it away, baby.
Okay. So you're gonna show the PowerPoint slides here over there?
Do you want me to show it, or do you want to show it?
No, I mean we can share it. Yeah, it's over here. It's in the desktop.
For once, you're sharing your screen. I like the new projector is pretty clear.
That looks really
It's wide. It's huge. Gotta get a shelf.
Like my box idea?
I do like the box.
Not aesthetically pleasing enough.
I think like a little shelf there would be even better.
No, but just a guess.
Then is that issue? You, can you see the slides?
Yep.
Yes. After hurricane.
This presentation would be better suited for next semester, but I say screw it, let's do it now. So if you're interested in topics, take the class next semester. All right, go ahead.
Okay. Can I start?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll talk.
Okay. I mean, before going to my kind of like tentative presentation, and thank you, Dr. Brody, give me a chance so that I can develop my speaking and like presentation skills. And at the same time, I really thank you because when I came here, when I'm taking Dr. Brody's course, and then I have in my mind that we always thinking about like recovery for the human system, but in my mind when I'm taking the plan 641 and plan 642, I'm thinking about like why we don't do like protecting our natural system. Like we are doing recovery for human system, but we are not doing for recovery for natural system. So that's how actually I started, and then Dr. Brody gave me a good set of data, and he said that he didn't think about before like that. And then kind of like Dr. Brody and me come together and then discuss the topic, and then this is what I'm right now. And this is kind of like middle stage, and all of the analysis and the things I did last summer. And thanks again, Dr. Brody, give me a chance to do internship in Center for Texas Beaches and Shores. So this is kind of like my tentative title. It's kind of like a special temporal analysis of Section 404, wetland alteration permitting program before and after Hurricane Ike event. So I'm kind of like thinking about resilience or recovery. Sorry. Okay. So before going to analyze the data, like from 1991 to 2014, so it's kind of like huge data, like almost 23,000, 21,326 permits altogether. But before explaining to that, I just want to show a little bit what is wetlands and their importance and why we are losing, and what is the impact of losing wetlands in terms of flooding, in terms of total ecosystem. So here it is, like some of the importance of wetlands are like we having in our system, like the coastal cities.
Right. I'm sorry to interrupt, but are you on presentation mode? Then we cannot see. You should just, if it is a presentation mode, you can share your screen. So we are still on the first page of your presentation.
Oh, okay.
You just stay in the PowerPoint.
And this
Escape.
Click this back.
Can you see the second slide?
Yeah, we can see that. Thank you.
Okay. So I cannot go to the presentation slide, right?
No, go back to the window. Just show the PowerPoint window.
Share the. Give me 1 second. Can you see the second slide right now?
Yes.
But can you move to the other slide so I can see whether it,
Okay, just
we are still on the second slide.
Yes.
It's not presentation mode.
okay.
Yeah, that's right. We can see your cursor. That's right.
It's
Yeah.
okay.
Now we can see it.
Yeah, it's fine.
Oh, I can go like this. Is it okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Keep going.
But we can, like in our screen, it doesn't show up.
Yeah, just do the go to the back. Go to the this. No, go to the desktop and change it to duplicate.
Okay,
Or drag this down this way. Just drag this. Drag it up to that.
Oh, there you go.
Move it. Yeah, like that. and then you can maximize it.
You can see, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I have to see over there. So those are the main importance of like the functions and values of wetlands. We are discussing. Dr. already mentioned those. Like one of the importance are like flood attenuation, protection from storm surges, and erosion and sediment control, like open space and recreation facilities. Those are the things, key themes that wetlands have an impact on our coastal community and city system. So by providing those kind of functions, wetlands have really a potential to like enhance and increase the community's resilient system. And at the same time, they can reduce the threat from sea level rise and climate change impacts. So, I mean, this kind of like image I downloaded from the like the internet source. So if we have in our city system like this kind of like patchy wetlands so that we can protect our city, like the developed area where the most of the kind of like flooded during flooding season. And then how we actually lose our wetlands. I mean, we are developing day by day and over the period of time, we're encroaching like many wetlands just because of the population density and also like this kind of development patterns, which is we call sprawl or urban suburban. This kind of area showing that we are losing a lot of wetlands over the period of time. And studies shows that like I mean, over the 200 period of times, like more than 51% of actual wetlands, we already lose like 47 million of hectares in terms of the numbers. And then the impacts, we can see the images, and that's the recent images from like the last, probably this year flooding, and this is a picture from Houston, like the Harris County. So those are the area we can see what are the impacts we are facing in our daily life activities during flooding time due to the loss of wetlands. So here it is like Section 404, that is kind of like wetland alteration permitting program that Dr. Rudy mentioned before, like last session today. So, and that one is established by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency in late 70s to protect and regulate the wetlands. So that if you're losing wetlands by something urbanization process, that so that we can reproduce our wetlands by using the Section 404 Clean Water Act program. So there, in the program, they have like 4 kind of types of permit. One is like individual permit, some general permit, and letter of permission. And the final one is like nationwide permit. If you want to know a little bit more about that, we have 2 other papers. Is Dr. Brody and Dr. Highfield is in does planning work. I can give you the reference so you can know more about those kind of permits. So after discussing those things, I just want to share my main research problem that I want to explain right now. The reason I choose the topic because we are losing wetlands like from 1991 to 2014 because we have all those data. We can see that we can track, especially and like temporarily. But before we already lose a lot of wetlands and we don't have any track those kind of. But still we have some of the data. But over here, the problem is like after having the wetland alteration permitting program, still we are losing a lot of wetlands than the net gain. So that is the key problem. And also the key problem is like urban growth and the expansion towards the peripheral city boundary, the county boundary. So we are losing again more wetlands, especially in the coastal city like Texas Gulf Coast, Harris County, Galvez County, and many other counties along the Texas Gulf Coast. So this is the main thing. And at the same time, we are thinking about like if any disaster happened during the period of time, then still we are permitting more program after the disaster event, which is we call like recovery, the recovery of human system. Because if the area has been impacted by a disaster event like Hurricane Ike on 2008, then we are losing more wetlands by providing the permitting program. So that is the key issue that I want to address in my research paper. So how can we reduce those kind of wetland alteration permitting program? That is not my key concern. Actually, the key concern is like we are heading to more a resilient community by doing recovery after any disaster event or not. That is the key issue that I'm trying to look at those. And then based on the data I've got from Center for Texas Beaches and Shores, that from 1991 to 2014, it's kind of like I already mentioned like 21,326 permits. All are mapped over here. You can see from here, and those are different 4 types. And you can see the more concentration is like in Harris County, Galveston County, and I don't know, I forgot the name of the county. So these are the 3 counties like more dense and most like contributed to the number of permits has been issued.
Rachel, let me just add a few things here. Look at that huge green area. That's a very large area, concentrated area. The green dots are called nationwide permits. Those are usually the residential mom and pop type permits. You know, extension on your house, dock off your backyard, at least in Texas. The red dots are called individual permits, and those are over half an acre. Those are usually very large residential developments or commercial development. And then there's this category called general permits, which tends to be very small in most states except for Texas. General permits are kind of a way to batch similar permits into one approval process. And the oil and gas, and also the telecommunications industry, but mostly in Texas, the oil and gas industry uses that component of the program for their pipeline approvals, where they can get 50 different permits batched together in one approval. And you'll see some of that later when you look more closely at the data.
I also have a question, Dr. Brody. These permits now, do they transcend boundaries, or how big is it by the parcel area? Is that how they're pulling these permits?
Yeah, it's an address or an X and Y coordinate. So it's parcel based.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. So based on those permits, like 21,000 permits, kind of like showing in the map, like from 1991 to 2014, you can see like 2014 is so high. It's because of there's been kind of like, as Dr. Brody mentioned, that like nationwide farming, probably like some pipelines and other stuff. Those are like, so they count like every permit within the kind of like pipelines count as a one, but under the midstream name, they have a lot of permits. That's because like 2014 is so high. But if you can see from 1991 to 2006, you can see like it's kind of like increasing the number of permits from 1991 to 2006, and then suddenly is drastically down to 2007, then 2008, and that is the year of Hurricane Ike. And then it goes up again from 2009 to 2011. I don't know what is the reason because of like 2012 and 2013 they again go down. But if you see from this chart, you can see you can understand like the nationwide permit is like more than 50% in terms of other 3 permits, like individual permit, letter of permission, and then general permit. Probably the national permit is kind of like more, as Dr. Brody mentioned, that like pipelines, gas, all companies, those are the things.
Is that Texas on the left? Wetland alteration permits change in numbers in Texas?
In Texas Gulf Coast is over here.
Yeah.
Those are the things.
Also to emphasize the nationwide permits, it's a very good indicator of sprawl.
Yeah.
And the general permit, that's just for Texas, is usually not that bar is usually not that high in other states. Again, the reason it's so high here is that's what the oil and gas industry uses they got a 3-mile pipeline, rather than do 50 permits, they can somehow batch it. No one can give me a straight answer on how that happens, but we know it does. And we mapped it, we can see it, actually.
So these are the main objectives in my research questions. So based on the data like from 1991 to 2014, as my topic is kind of like I'm looking at the notion between resilience versus recovery, because I'm looking at that during recovery, actually we are losing more wetlands and marshes. To understand that notion, I tried to kind of like categorize those 5 questions to understand what are the notions. And then the questions are kind of like that, like what type of wetland alteration permits have been issued before and after disaster event. So looking at the type, like nationwide, individual, general, and like letter of permission before and after. So here is I have to mention like that the time frame I choose for before and after is like 5 years, so that I can see within the 5-year period of time, I can see what are the kind of like permits issues and is there any relation between them or not. So one is like type and numbers and their change ratio, and also like look at the type of land cover based on the CCAP data like 2006 and 2010. What are the land, especially like what kind of wetlands, palustrine and other kind of estuarine, and also like high density, medium, low density, and also open spaces, so that I can compare before and after disaster event. And then again, I also look at the 100-year floodplains so that we can understand within the floodplain area or outside of the floodplain how many number of permits has been granted and what type of permits has been granted before and after event. And finally, it's kind of like you guys already know about like the insured loss on the damages from the coastal atlas. So using the insured losses that are just after Ike event, I tried to make a hotspot analysis between the permits after the disaster event and also like the damage within the area during the period of like Ike event, like September 2008. And then finally, to understand how alteration is related to resilience and recovery. So here it is, that is my study area. I choose a study area, not like the whole Texas Gulf Coast. I choose study area, Harris County, Galveston County, and then Chambers County. And the 3 county has 3 different characters. One is like Harris County is like high populated county, Galveston as well as like Harris County, but again, that one is close to the shoreline. And also same time, the Chambers County is like not that much populated county, but again, those have, so that I can understand what are the significance, is there any relation or no. And then based on that, I have a scenario like permit, number of permits before and after. This is my study area, and you can see those are like before permits and those are like after permits. This is one of my favorite graphs, and also Dr. really likes a lot because of you can see the shift like from before and after. You can see this one is coming like parallel to these 3 years, and then after that this goes down on 2008 and suddenly it increases just like boom. So here is a shift, and then it tells like after disaster like Hurricane Ike, there is something happened. It can be economical, it can be like recovery, it can be physical recovery, whatever. But there is a relation. It shows like all the 3 different counties. So this graphs tell us like that, yes, there is a relation, then we have to go more about what is the relation.
Wait, can I just interject real quick?
Yeah.
Can you go back? Yeah. So what you have is a 10-year time period of wetland alteration. And as you're going along, things are going fine, things are steadying. 2 things happen that can affect the scale and pace of this alteration. One is Hurricane Ike, and that happened in 2008. The other is what? What else happened in 2008, 2009 that would affect economic activity or development activity that would translate into more or less wetland alteration?
Price of oil went
Yeah, Katie said the recession. We went into a major recession in 2008, lasting into 2009. And what I think, in my bones and in with the data, is that we would expect that the pace of development and associated wetland alteration, particularly around these nationwide permits, would decline steeply in '08, which it did, and keep declining or remain depressed through '09, which was the height of this recession. But it didn't. It bounced back in '08 very steeply because that's recovery. So we're capturing recovery. So you could argue, even in the face of what we'd expect to be a dip, we're seeing a spike. That's recovery. And the whole idea is, if we're trying to maintain these ecological services, in this case, flood protection, the last thing we want to do is take away that ecosystem service as we recover from the event itself, because we're just making ourselves more vulnerable the next time the storm hits, and it's going to come. Right? So the expression in America is like we're shooting ourselves in the foot. I get excited about this graph because, to me, it's so interesting what's happening, and no one's ever looked at the effects of recovery on ecosystem services or ecosystem integrity in this way. And that's why we had them do 5 years before, 5 years after. The spike should not be there. The spike should be closer to 2010, 11, when we started to recover economically. All right, keep going.
Dr. Brody, I also have a question. Also, looking at the time frame from the time of impact of Ike and the time that claims are paid, both federally funded claims are usually paid about a year after the event, paid to the counties, states, and local governments, but also like people that are doing rebuilding efforts. So looking at the separate permitting, like whether it's general purpose or the nationwide permitting, I think that would also tell a different story, whether it's individuals that are filing for these permits or corporations or I mean, would that also be an important factor in that large spike?
Yes, which takes us to which is what we did. We looked at the type as well.
Yeah,
Sorry.
we also looked at the type as well.
Okay.
Now the claims, the flood claims are paid later, but they're tracked at the time of the event. So we have when they filed for the claim, so that we don't have that lag, unless we want the lag.
Yeah.
Okay, so keep going.
So the next, this is kind of like answering my research question. So that one is like 100-year floodplain. It's kind of like we have more charts, but I want to show this one because it can tell you like before and after Ike scenario within the 3 county. Like the blue one is like within floodplain and how many numbers of permits within floodplain for Chambers County, Galveston County, and the Harris County. Harris County is too high, but again, if you look at the before and after, it's kind of like similar, but Galveston before is high, then after low, but Chambers before is low, and then after is high. And then outside of the floodplain is like Harris County, you can see there is like huge up for like Harris County. So there is a relation. If you want to see the next map, you can see those are the points within the 3 county, and the blue one is like 100-year floodplain. The white one is like outside the 100-year floodplain, and you can see like in Galveston County there are a lot over there. So in Galveston County, like you can see that those are like inside the floodplain, and you can see the shoreline. Those are definitely because that's the shoreline. That's where a lot of our within the 100-year floodplain. In
So the reason to look at the 100-year floodplain is The worst case scenario is to alter a wetland, a natural wetland that's in the floodplain if you want to maintain that flood protection service. So we're trying to see if after the event, this recovery, yeah, we've got the spike in number, but now he's peering in closer. Okay, where is this alteration taking place? Is it more in the floodplain, more out of the floodplain? What type of, what locations are being affected? To better get at his answer, his question, is recovery impacting our resilience? That's why he's doing it. Keep going.
And the next research objective was kind of like, what type of land impacted? So the first thing when we trying to do kind of like GIS analysis, and then we have this kind of table, and we categorize like from, I categorize like 7 of those. One is like the types is kind of like palustrine wetlands, estuarine wetlands, and then develop, excuse me, low, medium, and high density, develop like the open spaces. And one is like forest land, and another is just like other category, like cultivated crops, agricultural, those things, and open waters. So if you, this table is kind of like, I made 3 different tables for 3 different counties to understand before and after I, and then before I use like CCAP 2006 data set, and then I use for after I is like CCAP 2010 data set. And then if you see, you can compare with the table, like total before I is 428 within the Harris County, and then after I is 505, the number of permits. And then based on, also you can compare with the typology of the numbers permit over here. You can see like national permit is going down after Ike even, but the individual permit is like going up after Ike even, like before and after Ike scenario. So at the same time, you can see, those are the color, like blue one is the GP, green one is the IP. And then we can see that from the Harris County, like palustrine wetlands, before Ike is like 44 permits has been granted, then after Ike is like 56, then again it's higher than the before. So if we go to the Galveston County, we can see kind of like same scenario, like 19 and 30, and also like individual permits are increasing, 4 and 14, and then 10 or 29 within the developed area. Kind of like same scenario, but it's kind of like a little bit different because that one is not that much urbanized in terms of Harris and Galveston County. So based on that, the finding from these, like there is a relation between before and after Ike, the number of permits has been increasing, especially for like individual permit type compared to other 3 different permit, GP, LOP, and the NWP. So there is a relation with this chart that we assume that those are kind of like recovery. So I'm doing my analysis and thinking about, I'm kind of like trying to make a t-test so that I can have a statistical significance. The next one is kind of like hotspot analysis, showing like, if you look at the chart, this is Harris County, and those are the pink one is kind of like hotspot. Based on the point analysis of after I permits from 2008 to 2013, based on the number of the permits, they can give you like a hotspot where all the accumulated points are generated. They can generate a hotspot, and you can see some over here, some over here, some over here. But the reason I wanted to do hotspot analysis with the insured loss because so that this can tell me there is a relation between recovery and the permit type. And I found something interesting for like Harris and Galveston County. You can see the brown one, like the chocolate one, that one is like for more like hotspot analysis, total damage after Ike within the September 2008, that the number of damage has been issued or the claim based on that, like they're also like point pattern analysis, and then I got hotspot analysis for them too. And you can see there are some overlap over there, some overlap over there, but those are kind of like segregated. Okay. And in Galveston County, those are interesting. I found 3 cross match, like overlap of hotspot analysis within the permit after write and within the permits, like not the permits, like the damage after write. So you can see those are the hotspots that they have overlap each other. So based on those analyses, I can say that there is a relation between the number of permits has been granted after I with the recovery period. So I can say that like doing recovery, we are actually losing more wetlands than like any other issues. Still, we have other issues like urbanizations, population density increases, and then like urban pattern changes, landscape changes, and also like the change of impervious surfaces. But still, doing recovery, we are not actually heading to resilience of the community rather than just like doing changing the wetlands and the natural and losing our natural system. Because in order to mitigate the flood risk and then flood inundation problems, there is a relation between the human system and the natural system. So kind of like that's it. And I'll be glad if you have any comments. Oh, that's all of the data source came from Center for Texas Speeches and Show. Thank you.
I have a very basic question.
Okay.
The purpose of these permits are to protect and regulate the wetlands. What are the guidelines, or are there any sets of guidelines that this is how these permits are regulating the wetlands?
Like you're asking how they actually get the permits?
No, like how do these permits ensure that the wetlands are protected or regulated, if that's what they are supposed to do? Like some mitigation measure.
Yeah, I mean, that's how the program, if you go to the Section 404 Clean Water Act program, then you can understand what is the purpose of like wetland alteration permitting program and how actually they do mitigation. But again, study shows that I can tell you like, based on one paper I got like, I mean, in Dr. Brody's paper, it shows like that from 1977 to 1987 in Oregon, 74 hectares of wetlands are impacted and 42 hectares were created based on the permitting program. That is how, like if you're losing wetlands, then you're gonna make same kind of wetlands. But again, there is an issue with like the function and the quality of the wetlands. At the same time, the number of the, the area of the wetlands.
Yes, also in the paper, I think it was mentioned that even if we create a wetland, it won't function as a naturally created wetland. And sometimes if wetlands are situated far from the original wetland, so there is a distance between.
And also they're losing the connectivity because previously they have like a patchwork. Now you're permitting a wetlands, now you're losing a wetlands. You're making a wetlands on the other side, but still they have like lackings of like connectivity, networking. So I mean, evidence shows that like the net loss is more than the net gain.
Yeah. And it's supposed to be the other way around.
But yeah, it's supposed to be other way around.
Is there any recommendation for revising this program?
Maybe I'm still thinking about the recommendation and like implementation. So kind of one will be like this, like now we cannot stop like the permitting program because we need those things, but still we have to rethink what will be the issues underneath the permitting program. Maybe we can specify based on the evidence, because there is still a research gap, like the literature gap, in order to do that, but we can think about like what will be the implementation, what will be the recommendation, so that we can further address those things.
Also, the paper mentioned that the mitigation measures are in the ratio 2:1. What exactly does that?
That's for every acre that you're destroying, you're supposed to put back 2 acres.
2 acres.
Okay.
2-to-1 ratio. But that doesn't happen.
But
Because we have a net loss in that paper,
Yeah.
in Texas, is more than Florida. I think Florida's better.
Yeah, but Texas is more like dispersed.
One of the maps that I really like.
Oh, sorry.
It's showing over there. Just drag it down this way. Maybe move it this way.
Okay, which one?
Go on. Oh, no, go back down. Yeah, those. No, those. These three maps, I think, tell a really good story of permits that are filed outside and inside of your 100-year floodplain. Because it almost says, if you zoomed into that Harris County one, like you did earlier, you'll see that some of those dots were right on the border. However, they're filed as outside of the floodplain. Yeah, see the red and purple. Purple is inside, red is outside. Some of those are clearly inside that floodplain, but some of those are right along the border of that 100-year floodplain, which leads me to believe that maybe the floodplain maps are outdated or not accurate or need to be updated as part of maybe your recommendations. Because if you're having, this was tied to insured losses, or is this just
This is like the
application-
floodplain, 100-year floodplain.
but the dots represent the permits
Permits.
for updating, upgrades, construction, or new development, right?
Yeah.
So does your data differentiate what's redevelopment, new development? Or
No,
anything
it's
like-
all
it's
together
a
just like
permit?
the development, like
Just-
the low, medium, and high densities within the one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I like this map a lot.
Talking about the floodplain, so much of the research has shown that the 100-year floodplain, using that as a metric for determining losses from storm is completely, it's just not, doesn't make sense. Almost half, no more of the lost claims from flood events are outside the floodplains.
Mm-hmm.
So it almost doesn't make a difference if you have wetland permits right around the edge of the floodplain. It might as well include the floodplain as well. And even if it goes beyond the floodplain, it's still going to flood anyway.
Yeah, I mean, especially when they're right along those creeks, rivers, and due to the, the urbanization and of all those impervious services, maybe increases that vulnerability. Well, that's good job.
Rachel, I have a question.
Sure.
Well, first I wanted just to respond to Rob's comment that maybe the scale of this map just isn't, it's not zoomed in enough for us to see those distinctions. I know a lot of times in GIS it'll look like it's not, like it'll look like it's in the boundary, but it's not actually. So I don't know. But anyway, my question was maybe just more clarification. Are you using the Section 404 permits as an indicator of human recovery, or what?
It's not like human recovery, but I mean, it's kind of like indicated that we are losing wetlands by permitting those programs because evidence shows that. At the same time, because nobody thinks about before that, like actually doing recovery, we are heading to more resiliency or not. That's why I'm kind of like thinking about that recovery has probably a kind of like correlation with those kind of permits.
Yeah.
I just want to see.
Yeah, it is an indicator. The permits, the activity is an indicator of human recovery after the storm or recovery from something. The issue is that recovery affecting the ecological system enough that it's compromising resiliency for future storms. So I'm changing your interpretation a little bit, Reja, that the permit activity is development activity.
Yes.
Development activity is, I think, in response, well, it shows it's in response to something that happened that year, which like, also keep in mind that it's possible if you look at this data, you have a shifting of development from one place to another. So the recovery happens. I mean, it was such a massive event. FEMA comes in, they just start throwing money. The permitting gates open, anything goes. And the more I talk to developers, the more I realize they see it as an opportunity to take that project they had sitting on the shelf that may have been harder to get approved. All of a sudden, anything goes. and there's all this money floating around and new need for housing. So I think if you look at that hotspot analysis, you'll see new development activity in places that are different to the northwest of Harris County than what was actually impacted. So go to Harris County.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, if you're just recovering from damage, why would you need a wetland permit? You're just building back exactly what you had. You're not doing anything additional. I'm still trying to figure out that issue. That's not. But you see that northern part of Harris County? There was no impact really from Ike. The impact was in the center and towards the coast, when he looks at his hotspots of damage. And it makes sense that you would then have some kind of shift. The other thing is, it looks like from your data, the post-Ike, while the intensity is higher for permits for development, it looks like and you got to run the t-test, but it could be more outside the floodplain because of that shifting more north. And maybe I don't think so, but you could argue they're shifting away because it's safer. I think it's just opportunities that developers see to see a housing need, easy permitting processes. No one's paying attention. Let's build a lot of stuff and sell it. So there's a lot going on here. We don't have all the information. We're not controlling for stuff. We're not there yet. But something's going on, and some of it could be good, like the development's happening outside the floodplain, so maybe that's more resilient, or it could be bad in that we're altering sensitive land covers like estuarine wetlands or polystrine. It'll be polystrine wetlands more so, and those really have value for flood protection. And this is all in response to a surge-based event. Well, we keep getting these big rainfall-based events, or we get another Allison. What does that mean for future flood events? Because these are multi-hazard areas. So all that hotspot of permits in the north of Harris County, if you get 20 inches of rain there next year, what does that mean? What are the implications? No one's thinking about that. No one's looking at the big picture. They're not systems thinkers. They're not ecosystem managers. They're just looking at one permit at a time. And by the way, this isn't even a thesis. This is a master's professional project.
Could be a thesis.
It could be, you could just present this, Reja, and you could be done.
No, I gotta do a test so that I can see sticky. But that's a good question. Like, Katie, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for your question. I write down the notes, but it's like, I think that will gonna help me when I'm gonna actually do the final presentation. I'm gonna keep in my mind, and I'm gonna try to address my final presentation as well. Any other comments?
I was not to you, Rachel, but I was going to say, when you say things like people aren't systems thinkers, they're not ecosystem thinkers, do you ever just feel like it's too much for me to handle? I just want to throw in the towel.
Absolutely.
Like, how can I
Once a
even
week.
change this?
Absolutely.
Because I feel that way sometimes, and I'm not even in the profession yet.
Yeah, it happens all the time. Why do we even bother?
Mm-hmm.
Or, I'm surrounded by crazy people, and I'm like, why am I even worried about humans? They're so not worth it. Screw the humans, save the wetlands, and yeah, but I get that question a lot. Sometimes my answer is, it's just, why do you keep doing it? Because it just helps you breathe in and out every day. It's what you do. It's who you are. These issues are so important, and you're making micro and sometimes major changes along the way. The fact that this data exists now, and other people are looking at it now, is a good thing. So yeah, it's maddening. You can ask my wife; she can tell you stories. Some days I'm like, let's just throw oil in the water and just pave over. Let's just cut down the trees. Like, yeah. So next class is Monday, and I'm gonna be somewhere in Florida broadcasting. And despite being so good to you so far anyway, yes, we're having class, but we're not gonna have class Wednesday. But I'm gonna give you a gift, because I know you probably haven't started working on your final paper, your problem paper, and yeah, waiting till last minute. What I want you to do is read one newspaper article. And the article has been posted, hopefully, under the readings folder of course readings folder of eCanvas. And it's a PDF at the very end. It's not in a daily folder. It's called Mitigation Banks. If you cannot find it or it doesn't open, please email somebody, preferably you. I want you to read that article. It's about wetland mitigation banks in Texas. And I want you to come prepared to talk about it. So we're going to read, this is going to be, and after this, we're going to be back on track. So Monday will be this. First, we're going to play with the atlas and wetland permits a little bit. Not sure what we're going to do, but it'll be cool. And then we're going to talk about the value of mitigation banking as a potential tool for ecosystem management. I'm very critical of, as I've probably already expressed. I'm very concerned about this, but it's becoming a big issue, and it's worthwhile for us to talk about. And I think this article hits all the different issues we want to discuss. If you're interested in the permits, in the permitting and the wetland alteration, there was an article today on the syllabus, so it's up on eCampus, where we looked at this spatial and temporal pattern of wetland alteration in Texas and Florida. It's that wetlands article. Read that. And there's also a lot more articles specific to wetland alteration and flooding, which we'll get into next semester in the resiliency class.
Dr. Brody, one of those
Yeah,
one
go
of
ahead.
the files came back with a website that did not work. It was page not found. One of the, underneath those two readings, there you had another link on the eCampus.
You're right. Turning wastewater into tap water.
Yes.
Okay. It worked on Emily's. Maybe you need to cut and paste it into a web browser. Yes, you need to, no, it's an error. So, all right, we certainly don't have to read that. This doesn't work. But read the wetland mitigation bank article from Monday. That's all you have to do, plus write your problem paper. And then we only have like 2 classes left, right? I don't know how that's possible, because then we're going to miss class on Wednesday, and then you're going to pick up on the 30th. We have 2 classes left. And the final paper is due at 5 o'clock when? What day do we decide? June? The 14th of December? So I wouldn't wait for those last 2
Is that
weeks.
for the people graduating too, or do I have to have it?
I think it's for everybody.
I mean, if you want to just preempt it.
Yeah.
I
What was the
I did an undergraduate symposium project on wetlands and wastewater filtration.
Same thing for you.
Trying to add a different laptop back then, so it's not safe on this one.
Wow. That's
But it proved more cost effective, and I wonder if there would be a way to get
Yes.
that the mitigation bank
No.
into wastewater
Let's talk
filtration.
about that Monday.
Because
Rachel, would you
we sent
please
it to Beaumont,
stop sharing screen?
plant, and they have.
Oh,
One
you're sharing the.
Talk about that Monday.
I'll see if I can get
Well,
that,
you
so I
still
can
have
have
time.
more data.
Paper's not due.
It was, remember Dr. Co?
Yeah.
I mean,
We
Yes.
cost benefit analysis.
All right, I'll see you guys Monday on the screen.
Excellent job.
Excellent
Like that.
job, Raja.
Thank you.
Good job, Rachel.
Hi.
Work hard on your problem
There's this
papers.
article right here.
Redo
Make
these.
it proud.
Set.
I
So we
saved
got
all
an
the stuff
email.
on eCampus a long time ago, so maybe
Oh,
maybe that's why.
I'll go finish. I'll go read.
Maybe
Yeah.
it's turned it
Okay.
into wastewater.
Bye.
And it was
I'll get that posted within probably the next hour.
meeting for
Help or do
the
you feel like
20
you, okay,
'Cause, I mean, the class period's working on the project. So
yeah, okay.
Because like our
do
days are off.
Busy.
What is that article?
You want this?
Not that
I
one,
have
the
one.
25th.
Good
I'm
luck
in
trying
basic.
to figure out the licensing because that is.
Oh, I know.
I've tried like 5 different ways and it's just. probably gonna
Under
take
course
too
reading.
And I went on my laptop, so